Focus on process, language, how children acquire theirs. Part 2, listening. Page 30. A. Initial listening. Now let's listen to a talk about how children acquire language. It may help you to concentrate on the talk if you close your eyes while you listen. Just relax and listen carefully.
What I'd like to talk about today is the topic of child language development. Now, I know that you all are trying to develop a second language, but for the moment, let's think about a related topic, and that is how children develop their first language. What do we know about how babies develop their language and communication ability? Well, we know babies are able to communicate as soon as they're born, even before they learn to speak their first language. At first, they communicate by crying. This crying lets their parents know when they're hungry or unhappy or uncomfortable. However, they soon begin the process of acquiring their language. The first stage of language acquisition begins just a few weeks after birth. At this stage, babies start to make cooing noises when they're happy. Then, around 4 months of age, they begin to babble. Babies all over the world begin to babble around the same age, and they all begin to make the same kinds of babbling noises. Now, by the time they're 10 months old, however, the babbling of babies from different language backgrounds sounds different. For example, the babbling of a baby in a Chinese-speaking home sounds different from the babbling of a baby in an English-speaking home. Babies begin a new stage of language development when they begin to speak their first words. At first, they invent their own words for things. For example, a baby in an English-speaking home may say baba for the word bottle or kiki for cat. In the next few months, babies will acquire a lot of words. These words are usually the names of things that are in the baby's environment, words for food or toys, for example. They will begin to use these words to communicate with others. For example, if a baby holds up an empty juice bottle and then says juice to his father, the baby seems to be saying, "I want more juice, Daddy," or "May I have more juice, Daddy?" This word juice is really a one-word sentence. Now, the next stage of language acquisition begins around the age of 18 months, when the babies begin to say two-word sentences. They begin to use a kind of grammar to put these words together. The speech they produce is called telegraphic speech, because the babies omit all but the most essential words. An English-speaking child might say something like, "Daddy, up," which actually could mean, "Daddy, pick me up, please." Then, between 2 and 3 years of age, young children begin to learn more and more grammar. For example, they begin to use the past tense of verbs. In other words, they begin to learn the rule for making the past tense of many verbs. The children begin to say things such as, "I walked home," and "I kissed mommy." They also begin to overgeneralize this new grammar rule and make a lot of grammar mistakes. For example, children often say such things as, "I goed to bed," instead of "I went to bed," or "I eated ice cream," instead of "I ate ice cream." In other words, the children have learned the past tense rule for regular verbs such as walk and kiss, but they haven't learned that they cannot use this rule for all verbs. Some verbs like eat are irregular, and the past tense forms for irregular verbs must be learned individually. Anyway, these mistakes are normal, and the children will soon learn to use the past tense for regular and irregular verbs correctly. The children then continue to learn other grammatical structures in the same way. Now, if we stop to think about it, actually it's quite amazing how quickly babies and children all over the world learn their language and how similar the process is for babies all over the world. Do you remember anything about how you learned your first language during the early years of your life? Think about the process for a minute. What was your very first word? Was it mama or maybe papa? Now think also about the process of learning English as a second language. Can you remember the first word you learned in English? I doubt that it was mama. Now, think about some of the similarities and differences involved in the process of child and adult language learning. We'll talk about some similarities and differences in the first and second language learning processes tomorrow. See you then.